Today we're taking a look at Fesenjān, a regal Iranian stew that is made with walnuts and pomegranate molasses. This dish slow cooks for hours, during which the walnut and pomegranate marry to form an amazingly rich sauce. With the help of some saffron and a beautiful duck, this will easily be one of the best stews you ever make. If you're new here, I'm Obi. I don't speak Persian and I want to get you cooking amazing Middle Eastern food at home. With a little help from some Iranian friends and my old buddy Google Translate, I've cobbled together this recipe for one of the most interesting and delicious Iranian dishes. If you watched last week's video and are looking for ways to use up your pomegranate molasses, then look no further. Just from the smell, I know this dish has got the tangy seal of approval, so let's jump right to it. This is actually a simple recipe, and there's just a few ingredients we need to prepare, starting with the meat. Most of the Fesenjān recipes I encountered use chicken or duck, and if you're cooking this for an everyday meal, it makes sense to use chicken. But I opted for the full regal experience and went for a whole duck. I'm going to break this down into 4 pieces by removing the legs and breasts. First, I removed the wingtips and then I popped the thigh socket and removed the thighs. After that, I sliced down either side of the breastbone and then I detached that from the carcass. Finally, I sliced the wing off of the breast and I had my 2 thighs, 2 breasts and 2 wings. Don't forget to keep your carcass and wingtips to make some great duck stock. If you want a more detailed explanation on how to break down the duck, check out my chicken and potato casserole video. It's the same technique, but the duck has slightly different proportions. With that messy work out of the way, go ahead and dice 2 onions into a medium or small dice. If you want these to dissolve completely into the sauce, then go smaller. Now we'll bloom one of the key ingredients in the Fesenjān, a small pinch of saffron. Saffron is the most expensive food in the world. A kilogram will cost you thousands of dollars and it's used extensively in Persian cuisine. It adds a really distinct floral smoky flavour to dishes and a little bit goes a long way. For this recipe I'm using about 20 to 30 saffron strands, which is less than 0.1 grams, but you can definitely get away with using a bit less. To bloom the saffron, I've placed it in my mortar and I'm adding a tiny bit of salt to it, then I'll grind it very fine. If your mortar is made of granite or rock, you're better off doing this in a bowl as the saffron flavour can stick in the stone. Once it's pretty much turned into a powder, pour 60 milliliters or 2 ounces of hot but not boiling water into the mortar, and that will dissolve the saffron. After mixing, you'll be left with liquid gold, which is a common ingredient in Iranian cuisine. Just be careful, this stuff will stain anything including your fingers. The other major ingredient that we're adding to our Fesenjān is walnut paste. This is really easy to make from walnuts and we'll be using 300 grams or 10.5 ounces for this recipe. To start, take your walnuts and toss them in a cold pan, then toast them for about 2 minutes, stirring constantly. Once you start to smell a walnut aroma, remove these from the heat and then they're ready to use straight away. Add these into a food processor or blender, and once in you'll process them very finely. In some of the Iranian recipes these are processed into a very fine texture till they are the size of breadcrumbs. I tried this and it was good, but it left a slightly gritty texture in the final stew. Another method I saw was to process the walnuts into a paste. If you let your food processor continue running, you'll end up with this texture, which resembles a soft cookie dough, and this is my preferred way of doing it. Once you've got to this point, you're ready to make the Fesenjān. To do that, I've placed a large pot on the stove and I'm adding my duck skin side down while the pot is cold. Turn the heat up to medium, and as the pot heats up it will render the fat in the duck or chicken. Once it's in there, leave the fat to render out for a minimum of 10 minutes. When the time is up, you should have a significant amount of fat in the pot and the duck or chicken skin will be very crispy. Flip the pieces over and let them sear for an additional 5 minutes. After that, remove them from the pot and set them aside. We'll add these back into the pot once we've made the sauce. Now we'll add the chopped onions to the pot, which will saute lightly in the duck fat for a couple of minutes. When they just start to soften, add in 1 teaspoon of ground turmeric and mix to combine with the onions. Continue to saute these for about another 4 to 6 minutes until the onions are soft and cooked through. When that happens, deglaze the pot with a small amount of water, and once it's clean we can add in the walnut paste. Add the paste in and then mix the onions and walnut together very thoroughly. You'll need to put some mussels into this as it takes a while to combine them, but after a couple of minutes of stirring you should have something like this. You'll continue to cook it, stirring constantly so it doesn't burn, and you're waiting for the oils to seep out of the walnut paste. This will take about 5 more minutes, and when it does your pot will look like this. At this point, I added in 1 tablespoon of tomato paste, which is used in only some of the Persian recipes I saw. It's entirely optional, but it helps deepen the flavour of the stew. I also added in 60 milliliters or 1/4 cup of pomegranate molasses, and then I mixed everything to combine. I let it cook for a couple of minutes more, and then when it reached a glossy uniform colour, I added in the seasonings. 2 teaspoons of salt, 3/4 teaspoon of black pepper, and an optional 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, which was used in only some of the recipes. Following that, I added in the saffron water from earlier, and if you want, you can reserve a teaspoon of this for your rice. Lastly, I added in 1 litre or quart of duck stock, which I made the week before when recipe testing. You can obviously use any stock in its place. Stir everything together very thoroughly until all the walnut paste has been dissolved into the liquid and the bottom of the pot feels clear. Then add all of your duck or chicken back to the pot and turn the heat up to high. Once it comes to a light simmer, turn the heat down to a very low setting and cover with a tight fitting lid. Fesenjān is famous for taking hours to cook, and once the lid is on there, we'll leave it to simmer for 2 full hours. If you're cooking this with chicken, I recommend removing the chicken from the pot after 1 hour, so that it doesn't completely overcook and fall apart. After almost 2 hours, my duck was perfectly tender, so I removed it from the pot and then left the sauce for another hour to reduce. In total, I cooked the Fesenjān for 3 hours, and it said the longer you cook it, the more the flavour develops. After the final hour, the sauce had reduced considerably. I took a few minutes to reheat the duck in the sauce and then I skimmed off a small amount of the excess fat. Mix it all together and when your sauce looks like this, it's ready to be served. To garnish, I've topped the stew with some pomegranate seeds and parsley, and I'm serving it alongside some steamed basmati rice. To get the golden colour rice, I took 1/2 cup of cooked rice and mixed it with a teaspoon of the saffron liquid. And that is how you make and serve a delicious Fesenjān. Don't forget to top it with some of that delicious sauce before digging in. Now let's go right to the taste test. Christ. You'll definitely be surprised when you taste this. The flavours have layered and meshed really well together, producing a complex and delicious tasting stew. There's also something oddly familiar about it. Both the flavour and texture remind me of beef rendang. It's just slightly tangy, a little sweet, and it has a really rich mouthfeel. Together with the basmati rice, it's a perfect meal, and one you should definitely try. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like or comment. Thanks to our Patreon sponsors for making this video possible. If you want to see more videos like this and want to support the show, then consider becoming a patron. The link and recipe are in the description box down below, and I'll be back next week with another recipe.